Hey everyone, Happychimenoises here, and today I want to talk to you about removing surrendering from League of Legends. It's a huge idea, I know, probably will change the whole game, but I think it's worth talking about because there are some big advantages. There are a ton of reasons why this is potentially a bad idea, and I'll get onto those, so don't worry. But first let's talk about where this idea comes from. I was on Twitter looking at Chris Roberts, who is a Rioter. He is producer on League of Legends. He's the guy who sort of designs systems. Recently, for example, he's been talking about a change to surrender rules for normal games, where you're going to be able to surrender with 4 votes instead of 5 votes at 15 minutes. You don't need unanimous surrender anymore. The reason they gave for this is the data they have, showing that whether this vote passes or not, if enough people vote yes, you've probably lost that game. Some people know what a winnable game is, and also if 4 people vote yes to a surrender at 15 minutes, they're probably just going to give up anyway. People aren't really committed to that game anymore. So this is something they're testing in normal games, not coming to ranked yet, but it might at some point. Initially I thought this was a good idea. I'm someone who's played a lot of ranked, including on stream, getting to Diamond 1 with off-meta picks, and one thing I always hate is people hostaging you in a game that you know is probably lost. So it's a bit ironic that someone like me, who probably surrenders a bit more than the average, is arguing that it should be removed. My potential idea is that Riot should maybe remove surrendering as an option in ranked. Just completely take it away from players to use. It's a massive change. I can't remember a time when it wasn't even in the game. I don't know if Riot added it when the game first came out and never really thought about it, but we've never been without it. And some context to add for other games. CSGO, for example, you can't surrender unless someone leaves. Dota 2 has no surrender system unless you're in a party of 5. People are happy to keep playing, see if they win or not. Lots of games don't have this system. It's really rare that League of Legends even does. I think if Riot added it now, it would be a pretty big surprise for everyone. But I think it is something that might be worth testing, just for the health of the game. I'm sure I'm not the only one to experience people giving up after the first kill, first blood. Maybe they die twice to their laner, and then they've stopped trying for the rest of the game, and they drag the team down. I think the really toxic players like that will always be toxic, but I think there's a group of players in the middle. Sort of the average player. These players are excited to play League, they get in game, one of their teammates is toxic, and maybe they get convinced into surrendering as well. I think having this easy out of a surrender to get out of the game drags a lot of us into that partially toxic category, and I think removing surrendering would help with it a little bit. Right away, reaction, does this make any sense? There are some big problems with this. The first is, what if you want to surrender a game, you know it's lost, and now you don't have the option to? Well, instead of looking at opinions and what people think, we can actually look at statistics for this. This is a League of Graph screenshot showing the game times when surrenders are used and when they aren't used. You can see that in the elo that most players are in, it's about a 2-minute difference. So in an ideal world, removing surrendering makes the game better, more healthy, you have better games, and worst case, you might end up waiting another 2 minutes in a lost game. So I would say this trade-off of losing 2 minutes in a game that you think is lost is probably worth at least trying to come back. Surrenders aren't actually as common as people think. Here are the full stats in case you want to see. One thing I thought was crazy was a 60% FF rate in Challenger. It gets higher as you go up in rank, funnily, and that's one thing that people bring up a lot, like, is a game winnable, is it not? I think overall opinion doesn't really matter on that. I think in general lots of players do know if a game is winnable or not, but you can also see just by region how ridiculously it shifts, like Korea having a 40% surrender rate. 40% of the games on the Korean server, no matter what elo you're in, are getting surrendered. Compare this to EU West, only 24%. So I do think cultural differences are also a huge thing for this. And hey, maybe removing surrendering will never be possible because Korean players play in PC bangs sometimes. So they want to surrender and have another fun game instead of continuing with their game. The question really is, are these drawbacks big enough to stop the advantages that removing it could have? So let's talk exactly about those advantages. The first one, of course, slightly better games. People won't give up as often because they don't have the option to surrender. So anyone who's not toxic and wants to play the game, they'll be busy playing the game, they won't be arguing about surrendering. Secondly, if surrendering is removed, sure, we might see an increase in AFK stats like this, but at the same time, if surrendering is removed, people start AFKing more, then Riot can just increase the strictness of the system and get them banned. Especially leaving games, which someone brought up. If someone leaves the game, maybe you could do something similar like in CSGO, where you can only surrender if one of your teammates has left the match permanently. And I think, yeah, the game quality by then is compromised, so you shouldn't really have to play it if you don't want to. Another thing I've seen scrolling through Twitter replies, for example, if you play an early game champion and the game doesn't go your way, what are you supposed to do? You're just supposed to sit there and lose? And also lots of things to do with Riot's other problems. Stuff like, oh, there are bots in my games, I want to surrender those games. I really see these problems, but I think that they're not even related to this in any way. I think that for example, the bot problem is something that Riot need to fix by fixing the bot problem. I think that removing surrendering is completely unrelated to that. And the issue of game length and the champions you pick, they're really dictated by Riot. If Riot want to make the game shorter, which they have been, then stuff like early surrender being easier is exactly what they would want. The problem is that the shorter the game gets, the more toxicity increases, because people know that they've lost and they want to get out of it. Whereas if you have the option to come back, people are committed to playing, and they want to see what happens, they want to have fun. I'm obviously biased a bit towards longer games, but really Riot decide how long the game should be. And so really surrendering is a product of Riot's game design. It's not actually something that's necessary in the game. They've decided that games should be lost at some point, depending on the champions that exist, or that people might really need a way to get out of the game. But honestly, if you always have a chance to win the game, then why would you ever want to leave? And so in this current version of League of Legends, surrender probably should be in the game, but that doesn't mean it's the best version of League of Legends there can be. So I think that people should have at least an open mind about how this might help the community. One thing that I thought was kind of funny was the responses I got to this tweet, just showing how badly this kind of help for the community is needed. And it's really hard to even suggest anything like this, especially on social media, because people immediately either have, I really agree with this, or I completely disagree with this, and you're an idiot. I don't think surrendering was really added to the game for the purpose it's used currently, for people to argue about whether the game's winnable, be spamming in chat trying to convince other people to surrender. Instead of actually figuring out a solution to something, you press surrender and you get out of there. And I think it leads to a lot of toxicity in the same way. One thing I see a lot of is people saying, I don't want to be in a game with these toxic players, I'd rather surrender. But really the problem you have isn't with surrendering, it's with the Riot punishment system. You want them to be banned and you want to win the game. You don't want to lose for their sake. It's silly we've given control of the game to toxic players for no reason. It's also funny to see that people saying that people will just run it down to lose the game instead. They act as though this isn't already a problem Riot need to fix. Surrendering has nothing really to do with this. And also, if surrendering was removed and then people started inting, they'd be easier to find. It would be harder to soft int if surrendering didn't exist, because you couldn't convince anyone to surrender. To lose the game, you'd really have to die a lot more, and so that would be easier for Riot to find out. So my opinion is that maybe Riot should at least consider something like this. Let me know what you think in the comments, please be nice to each other when you're talking about this. YouTube comments are actually generally really smart. I see a lot of good reasoning in lots of my comment sections. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.